So today we're going to have an interview with Tobias Cramm, who is a music teacher at the music school in Laufen-Thierstein in Laufen, Switzerland. Thank you so much for being allowed to interview you. So you were originally trained in Bach-style improvisation by your teacher, Rudolf Lutz. And then you discovered Robert Gjerdingen's book about the 16th through 18th century Italian improvisation and composition tradition called partimenti, which you now teach to students in person and also via Skype. And you have taught partimenti to the young composer Alma Deutscher from the age of 5. And Alma has profoundly touched millions of people by proving that the art of composing beautiful music in the classical tradition is alive. So what has it been like to teach Alma and experience her development as a composer?
It was a very difficult thing. And I would say there is a lot. So we are talking of her as a composer, and we can think of somebody who is constantly in a kind of creative process that can be expressed in improvisation, listening inwards to melodies that she can imagine, and then putting these melodies into more precise structures or into a more of an architecture of a composition. So I was just very happy throughout the whole time we spent together to see this creative processes being or manifesting themselves through various activities like improvisation and composing.
Mm-hmm. It must be really wonderful to develop the creative processes of young people. Can you share more about your insight in how to develop musical creativity?
Well, it's of course it's a very big word, creativity. And I think perhaps when it comes to the context of what we just call classical music or the training in classical music, perhaps my first thought would be, can we think of this music, I mean, as it comes to us from the past, as a whole way of expression and language. So I think the notion of language and structure that I can learn in a practical way and be creative in the sense of recombining and or putting together in different ways, making variations and so on. That was a kind of key concept to me when I learned about new ways of thinking. And I would say that it is not only just creativity, but for me it's the interaction between the research that is done actually on the Neapolitan tradition, on the whole question of how in these conservatories in Naples, boys were trained in music, which has many aspects, and many things to consider. So on the one hand this, and on the other hand our our way of learning classical music as something that can be thought of as a language.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain that more? What you mean by learning composition as if you were learning a new language?
Well, it has to do with the relationship between different sorts of activities. So you can think of one side or one aspect is more a mental thing, what we would call musical imagination or musical representation, like we think of something without hearing it. I mean, we hear like with the inner ear. This is like one thing, and also that has to do with musical memory or just the knowing about music. But then there's on the other, or on one other side, there is a practical thing. So we do something. So we practice, which is we just enter a process of practice in an expressive way, which is, for example, singing at Naples. It would have been during the first years. It would have been singing the solfeggi, singing these melodies, knowing how to read the notes, but not just read, but also speak and sing the notes. And by doing so, already memorizing a lot of what we would call this language. And for me, I think what is very interesting is that there is a kind of awareness in all these processes that links it all together. So I can be more active mentally, and I can be more active practically at an instrument or in singing or in group activities, and I can practice and reflect, and it goes back and forth very smoothly. So that is something that was new to me at that stage when I learned about this whole tradition, and when I had the opportunity to work with Alma and see actually her improvising, which was always, I mean, since we met, which was a part of what she just did. She was just improvising. She was constantly composing, improvising, looking for ideas and so on. But then I observed that there was an influence or a kind of impact from the field of activity that was based around these partimento structures, which allowed for creativity still, but and also enhanced with more kind of awareness or more flexibility also.
I heard in the interview you gave with Mikhail Hogan that you used a very nice metaphor of thinking of it as a bridge. Can you explain that metaphor?
Well, I guess in my biography, like as I learned music as a teenager and then later studied piano and so on, there was like two separate fields. Like there was just my practice at the piano, learning repertoire, performing, thinking a lot, of course, how I would perform the music and so on. And on the other hand, there was the the kind of thinking about music, like all that you would call music theory, where you also during your studies you sit down, you do assignments, you write scores, you write melody, you analyze harmonies, you analyze form, you try to understand music from an intellectual level, which of course is all very interesting. But what always was for me a fact that it didn't really have that sort of impact or that sort of flow between that I would have wished for. And I think this is kind of this bridge where I think we are. So the music is like a river, and I don't know, we swim in the river, but we can also walk along the river side, on both sides. And perhaps one person is more just in the practice, and the other person is more on the theory side. It's also observable if you look at the different fields of studies, or how do you say that? Like if you look at practitioners on the one side and theorists on the other side, like music theorists, also scholars, often they cannot really talk to each other because the practitioners have such an individual embodied knowledge in the practice. It's hard for them to speak about it. And on the other hand, the scholars, they can very well speak, but they don't have so much sensual experience about the music.
You also spoke about it as a bridge between the different schemas, the different structures that the student has learned on the one side, and the free imagination on the other side.
Yes, definitely. I think that's very nice to see structures as a tool for clarification, perhaps, or putting something into a shape, but then also which has a kind of tendency to crystallize, to get firm. And on the other hand, yes, the flow of imagination, of improvisation, of what is something that is often described as it just comes to you from somewhere, if you are in a good state of mind. And then seeing how these models can actually inspire you, or can be like a little light, or a little, how do you say, when you lit a candle. And
a spark.
Yes. Mm-hmm. This is all very general, I know. I don't know.
And what kind of learning environment is optimal to encourage the creativity of the students to blossom?
I think it's really various factors that contribute. First of all, it's just probably, first of all, it's just a trust from all adults towards children, that children are creative naturally, and that they need, that it's really that they well, yes, they need a space for expressing this just on a regular basis. I think this can be very short. This can be just an attention of 5 minutes a day, so that a child just can do what it likes to do. without being judged or without interference from outside. This is probably one key, just as accepting this natural wish of many children. It's very different. Some are more in this and some are very little. In my experience, most children have that natural wish to express something that they like, that they find beautiful, or yes, kind of rapport.
The kind of what?
Rapport, like a relationship or a connection.
Between the student and the teacher.
No, I mean just something that they relate to.
Mm-hmm. The music.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's well, yes, having as varied as possible, like musical experiences, and real. Yes, I mean also the question in our times of the kind of liveliness of musical experience. We have so much music through the technology that is just produced artificially, and we have a lot of music just at our disposal, like pushing a button and then there is music. But I think there is a question of like of quality in it also. When we really are part of a musical performance in a concert or in a group of people who are singing or whatever, it's just something different. Mm-hmm. In many ways, actually, even in the way of the actual sound waves.
Then Tobias Cramm went on to say, and when it comes to learning music, I think it would be nice to have different connections between different fields in learning, so that the whole focus on learning repertoire is somehow relaxed a bit, is put in a context of, I learn repertoire, of course, much in the way I learn language. I read books, or I read a poem. I learn some things by heart, which is a very important thing, but with language, it is very natural that children express themselves through language. They also learn to write their own texts. They learn to write about their experience. Also in music. Why shouldn't we encourage children to create their own music in any way, really however they want it to sound? It can also be saying what you learn in the music, what you play with the music, especially classical music, lends itself very nicely to modifying structures, the elements, in different ways, so that the experience is always alive. More interaction between performance and creation.
Let's talk a little bit now more specifically about partimenti. What is partimenti and how does that help develop the musical creativity and the imagination?
So, partimento is a term that appears in hundreds of manuscripts from the Neapolitan tradition. Very, very briefly, you can think of it as mostly a bass line that serves for a process at a keyboard instrument or also in written form to create a full-fledged or more rich composition piece. It is something like a hybrid a bit of theory or just a kind of kind of instruction and a practical activity, I would say.
And then Tobias continued, "It is one part of several parts of what we conceive of as the whole learning tradition in the Neapolitan conservatories. It has become the key word, the partimento tradition. I would say it is not really right, because
the so-called solfeggi are at least as important as the partimenti, and also then the idea of counterpoint exercises, contrapunto, which also appears in many titles, is also a very important factor. So I have struck, I entered this whole field about 10 years ago,
and then Tobias continued, I have been working with these partimento materials, so I know a lot about partimenti, but I still need to go a long way to understand the whole tradition. Then I think the solfeggi, the idea of singing in these syllables, for example, do, re, mi, fa, sol, plays a very important role in the future. Perhaps I should do something practical so the listeners can understand.
here I just show this to you. This is the transcript of the baseline. Just as a series of notes, bass notes. I see it as an invitation for a process of voices working together. So whenever two voices sound together, normally they have a tendency to create a harmonic context. Even one voice actually through time. So when you hear, it's not just four notes that have no context, but we immediately hear, this is something probably on that key that we hear, a major key, and so on. But if I just add to each of the notes another note in the upper register, which I then would call an upper voice, I can do this with my two hands, like left hand, partimento bass line says. My right hand adds a voice, which is just note per note, counterpoint. So then the question is, how do I start? For the first note, I choose a note that is in consonance with the first one, with the bass note. So I have the options of octave, third, or fifth. So as soon as I decide that, I have a kind of layer. Because now what I want to do is go on with that voice in a movement with the bass line. So what should I do next? For the next note, I have a choice. I can go, and already here it's a lot of music, because there's a lot of sound that creates that harmonic space. So if I want to go on, I could go, for example, I could go back. I prefer. So for the next note, I could go
something along these lines. The important thing is that I am aware of the many choices that I have along the way of creating that voice, and I actually explore them, and I have an inner image. And then it goes on with adding more of these voices, starting on some other note that I mentioned before, a fifth or an octave above, then eventually having a kind of fabric of voices, several voices that are possible above the same bass line. And then at the keyboard, it is very interesting also to do with children, saying, we memorized, we worked out one voice, and then separately, we worked out a second voice. We know these voices very well because we play them all the time. The left hand, the bass, the right hand, that voice. Now let's play the two voices at the same time so that we get a structure of three voices. I tried to give an example to show the practicality of all this. If you look at the whole process of what has been going on, there has been playing, there has been listening to sonorities. I can introduce what is known as the rule of the octave and things like that, structures, conventions actually, about sounds that are very typical for this period.
Well, basically this was trying to show this process of adding. I put these. We just take this string of notes. Now playing them always with my left hand, I add. For example, and then now I put them together in the right hand. As soon as I can do this, I can also do it. And that is something that is actually, it is very different for the right hand to do, but I know what to do because I know the shape of the voice. I know the melody, the voice, the melody of the voice. So I can kind of guide my movement at the keyboard instrument through what I already know in my head. This is something. And then, of course, you are asking what has this to do with creativity? I think it starts to get flexible when I see that this is, of course, one nice option. I mean, this is one nice way to do because it just sounds a kind of logic. But there are different ways as well. I can explore them, I can compare. And as soon as I start comparing different versions that are kind of similar and different, I think this is where creativity starts, because I have something to relate to. I have different, different viewpoints.
Yeah, you have a tutorial about with a bass line of 4/no, where you show the different possibilities above each note of the bass line, and then you choose a melody from these possibilities. And as Robert Gjerdingen was stressing in his book, the idea is not to create vertical chords, but to create horizontal voices.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you, yeah, one thing, when I started learning about Alma, what most inspired me, no, let's go on to another instead. Could you give an example of some of the building block schemata, or what I call the Lego bricks for people here in Denmark, that the students learn, and how that helps develop the musical imagination and the ability to improvise and compose?
Yes, yes, yes. So yes, there are several toolboxes, to say. I should mention actually the tonal tools by Liebenstroppe. I'm a bit sad that it's not really practiced so much as it should, or as it could be. The nice book from there. And with the schemata of that Robert Gjerdingen has like elaborated in his book. Yes, I work some, I introduce them because many of them are inside the partimenti as well. Give me an example of this book, of this piece that everybody knows. Bum, ba-dum, 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 bum, 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 bum. In a nutshell, you have many of these schemata. For example, in the beginning, that goes. And if you extract the kind of walking along the scale, which is like at first musical thought, and then like a little cadence, like the gesture actually of closing something, and then it's like walking the bass line, starting from the tonic, walking down towards the dominant. And it corresponds to what Robert Gjerdingen calls the modulating pringer, this idea of, from the perspective of F major, this will be from the fourth scale degree, walking down to the tonic. And then again, deceptive. There's a double bar.
You said deceptive.
A deceptive cadence.
Right.
Actually, we would expect already the first time.
Right.
So we got. Now it's a double bar, and now happens something that's very idiomatic also for many minuets and smaller pieces. If you condense it, it is actually like the gesture of kind of dominant or leading note to a minor chord, which turns out to be the chord on the second scale degree of the future key that we want to go. C minor, and the same, a step lower, bringing us back to where we want to go. So this is also discussed in historical sources as Rieper calls it the fonte moment, like something that flows down. So more elaborate, but everybody can hear. Aha. And so on. So this is the whole world of models that we can learn.
And how can learning these help stimulate the imagination?
Well, with the time, for example, you can say we are building our little own piece. So, and then you can have, you can start with a very limited number, just 3 or 4 different models, and eventually add more to expand the structure.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I was I could say this is my first half.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then I can say
Mm-hmm.
I can also use the idea of the primer actually already in the first key.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see I can expand the structure, compress it again. And that process of doing then also at the keyboard is something that always an inside out and an outside in process. And probably this is also a key concept of this whole activity, that you learn something by doing, and the doing is something that has an impact on your on your skills of representation also.
Mm-hmm. That leads me to the other thing. When I was started learning about Alma, what actually most inspired me was the musical dialogue that you had with her. For example, the one on the organ at the age of 7, which you call question and answer, where you each play an improvised musical phrase in succession, and you develop each other's thoughts. Can you explain about how this question and answer works?
It's very simple. I mean, you just are. It's something she called it that way, and the first time doing it became a kind of notion. And it's just one of the partners starts and eventually stops, and the other person just needs to continue in a kind of similar vein. And then it goes back and forth. And it can be a very open space. It can be also, it can have some rules. And you can say, we can agree on certain things that we want to do. But basically, it's just a sharing of ideas, and then adapting one's. I mean, not just 2 persons doing their own thing, but 2 persons trying to play in the same kind of spirit or character.
A real Socratic dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Creating a story together.
Yeah. We have not been doing that on the piano, but we have my colleague. They have a very musical son, and we have been having singing question and answer, where we just sing a phrase and then the other one proceeds, and he's really good at it. It's really wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Could you just play the rule of the octave and just explain how this reveals the other three unseen voices, so that you can be inspired to a full four voice. You referred to it before, but could you just play it for us?
Well, yes, it is. It's really a framework. Rule of the octave. Many people think of it's a scale, and I try to. I can do the little audio that I did with the the idea of a cable car.
That I will have I will put I will put that on as a link. But if you could just play it so people hear how it goes.
Okay. I'll do it in A major, like. I like to walk like through the scale, but not all the way through, but just from the tonic towards the dominant. Then I add. I start on the octave. Now I go. I started an octave. I went down a step, so to create a sixth. Mm-hmm. So I can go in parallel motion. And I end with the fifth, because the fifth is more stable. Mm-hmm. Then all I need to add is a voice that starts on a third, which is a tenth really, but mm-hmm. Now with the three voices. And on the web, I can also do segments of just which will prove to be playable also the other way, in the other direction. Mm-hmm. And I can also add that voice. And that voice can actually become a fourth. Because it sounds very nice with the third and the sixth together. As soon as I get this is now always me playing three notes in the right hand and only one note in the left hand. I can do all kinds of different layers of these voices. I could also go with that voice. I could go an octave down, so I get. See? Mm-hmm. It's very much in line with the choral thing. So there's this interaction between harmony, like chords, and the contrapuntal movement. Mm-hmm. And then, so it's more, again, it's just about the movement, especially from it's kind of, again, it's just we see these figures 3, 5, 6, and then of course we can do what all we want. Mm-hmm. And think of the voices. If we play three voices in the right hand, we can also go. So that voice is actually going down. Mm-hmm. We give place to the other voice. Mm-hmm. there's a whole, really, there's always different options to choose.
Wonderful.
Shall I go on?
Because I have a couple other questions. Let's see. Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
No. It's just the point is to show that it's not one succession of voices and chords, but all these possibilities that go around.
Right.
And that are always context dependent. So also about the direction of the bass.
Mm-hmm. You have initiated a partimento summer camp in Switzerland, which you call mentiParti. Can you tell us about the idea behind it and the development process during the last 2 summers?
Mm-hmm. So for the first year, 2 years ago, I just wanted to bring together my students that are all basically from far distances, different countries. I wanted to create just an environment where they can come together, share their ideas, improvise together. And it's a simple idea, but it's very powerful, I find. And it was wonderful, 2 academies with a lot of kind of informal learning going on. Also inspired by my guest teachers, Peter von Tour from Sweden, last year, Ewald de Mere.
From Oslo.
Yes, from Oslo and from Belgium. Lydia Carlisi from Switzerland, Nicholas Baratwana from England. So a mix between inputs from lectures, concerts, and lessons, like group lessons, individual lessons, a very open space. And I think it's the most, probably the key element is just the time that you have for absorbing new. Everybody is so individual, you see, on their way with all this. But when it comes to group, many people can relate immediately to what the other person is doing. And it's always about creation. So it's always about finding new ways, about enjoying what you found and then going on from there. For me, it's really an amazing time, and I hope to. I mean, I want this whole project should be, this whole initiative should or could create that space on the one hand, which has this openness, and on the other hand, make even more than an impact for one's personal activity as a musician. I think also when it comes to performance again, because we all go back then to our lives as teachers and performers, and I think there can be more of the inspiration for the performance as well in the future. Because when you start to create your own music in a way in this space, you just understand better what you are dealing with all the time. It can enhance, I think, the whole idea of music tradition.
And you will have the 3rd summer camp in Basel, Switzerland, from July 5th to the 12th. Yes. So people who are interested can contact you.
Yes.
Then on a different subject, Alma has been very outspoken about the need to create beautiful music in our age, and her striving to do that despite criticism that her music does not reflect our modern age.
With Alma, actually, it was something that I was, and that changed my thinking, my personal thinking a lot when I saw, or when I just saw also the success, and also the way her compositions came into the world and were received and so on. And I realized that I was very much rooted in that kind of thinking, that when it comes to composition today, you should be in a certain, it should sound just a certain way to be modern. And everything that doesn't sound that way is not really in our present time. So that was kind of bias, a strong bias that I had myself. And for me, it is just the fact that I was touched by the melodies of Alma, or by the music of Alma. Touched means they just became part of my musical experience. I liked hearing them, and I do a lot of, and often a melody just goes in my mind, and it keeps repeating, and it's just kind of like you have your earphones, and just it's a part of a daily routine. And I observed that Alma's melodies were very often popping up as a kind of that world that I had inside myself. So I had to realize that it's just part of what is nice and essential for me. So why shouldn't I accept it as the music of our time? Then for me, there is just a lot of, there can be a lot of freedom within musical styles and languages. There need not be any judgment, as long as there are people who are, it's about the people who have the connection to that music, and then they can express something with it. For me, that is the key question. Is there a community of people who really who can relate to that, to any kind of music? So many ways of expression in the world. If you look today, it's just amazing. Just to make it, to turn it back to education, for me it's just about classical music to be, just to become more creative again. That's key.
Is there anything else you would like to say to students, parents, and music teachers about how they can inspire musical creativity?
Well, I guess just the openness, probably. Just the openness for trying things that you don't judge immediately, but you do, and try and reflect again the other day, come back. That's probably kind of attitude that I encourage.
Try to reflect about what?
It's kind of just trying things without judging immediately. Just and then come back later.
Or come back, yeah. And do you think it's possible to develop the musical creativity of children and adults all over the world, and thereby create a new renaissance?
Yes, absolutely. I see it happen.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking time. It's been really wonderful, and I've actually wanted to interview you for a long time, but now we have done so, and I hope that I give you all best wishes for your mentiParti summer camp this summer, and just thank you very much for your work in trying to really stimulate music creativity in children and others around the world. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.